So what I'm trying to simply do here is to prohibit federal funds from now being used to allow for our national parks to be turned into encampment. Those listening from New York City understand that Floyd Bennett Field, which was a park enjoyed by over 100,000 New Yorkers annually, has now been made a migrant encampment for roughly 2,000 to 3,000 individuals. So it's number one, inappropriate. It's wrong to take these public spaces from our citizens. And number two, it's just simply unsustainable. Look what is happening in New York right now with our mayor saying they need to do slash across the board cuts, billions of dollars that they're spending on this migrant crisis that was self-made, by the way, because of the policies of the president and then the misinterpretation of the right to shelter law by our mayor. So those two things have created this mess. We need to just stop it. People, we are a welcoming nation. We are a welcoming city. I'm the daughter of immigrants myself, but people have to follow the proper process. And the proper process, by the way, for asylum is you apply from the next safe country. We have people from over 120 countries claiming asylum at our border when we're only bordered by 2 countries. Yeah. So people are abusing the system, not to mention that 50% of those cases are denied in court, which means people are utilizing this to gain access to our country, but they don't even have legitimate claims, and they're hurting all the people that are in the system waiting, but followed the rules and done everything right.
Well, I want to definitely talk to you about asylum law. There are a couple of very specific questions I have for you, Congresswoman. It's not lost on me, though, that you mentioned the Floyd Bennett Field in Brooklyn, New York, on the historic registry. We understand that a lot of migrants who have been sent there got on a bus and went right back to Manhattan because there was nothing there for their families. They didn't know how to get their kids to school. Do you have the votes to pass this bill?
I do believe we have the votes, and I do believe that it will pass with a bipartisan vote, as it did in the committee earlier this month or last month. But what I'll say is this, you're right, and it's not safe for the migrants either, right? There's been significant flooding on that property. It was really devastated during Hurricane Sandy, but even during a terrible rainstorm like we had a few weeks ago, it had a foot of water. So it's not safe for anybody involved. And the reality is the mayor just has to stop doing what he's doing, and the president needs to take action to secure the border. And you mentioned, comprehensive immigration reform.
Yes.
I mean, the Republicans certainly want border security, but we're willing to work with the Democrats on more visas to make sure people can come and work legally. We do have an employment issue in our country where we have a worker shortage. This can be addressed. It could be a win-win if we do it right. But the bottom line is the process needs to be appropriate and legal. Okay, well, what's happening right now, who's benefiting? The drug cartels who are being paid thousands of dollars per person to smuggle these individuals into our southern border. We know from Doctors Without Borders, their recent report, hundreds of these individuals, in just Panama, by the way, in one month, they had been raped, women and children. So it's very dangerous, it's treacherous. People drown daily, and not daily, but regularly in Eagle Pass. Just this weekend, there were 14 people who drowned.
Well, let's talk about specifics here, Congresswoman, if we could. I'd like to ask you about asylum reform. I'd like to ask you about the parole system. These are things that our listeners are really kind of keying into now as the contours of a potential deal come together. We're hearing from Democrats in the Senate, Congresswoman, who say they are open to changing asylum law. What does that look like when we come back to it? Is it a toughening of standards for those who can express credible fear, for instance, coming from other nations? What would a change in asylum law look like to you?
Well, first of all, we need to add more judges and asylum officers to actually hear these cases and determine at the border whether they are legitimate cases or not. Because like I said, 50% of these cases are not legitimate. They get denied in court, and meanwhile, they're clogging up the system. The second thing we need to change is this last in, first out system that this administration has put in place, where somebody comes over the border, they're actually first to be heard in court, as opposed to people who have been waiting in line. That's really unfair to those who have been waiting years to be able to hear their cases, and now they're being shoved further back in the line because of this mass migration from our border. Third of all, we need to enforce the law that says that you have to go to the next safe country. By that standard, only people from Mexico or Canada would be coming to the United States, and that would certainly stem the flow. People would apply from the next safe country, and then they could wait until their court date, and then they can.
Should that come with a stay in Mexico policy as well?
Well, it should if they are coming from a third country. That's what I'm trying to say. We can actually address all of it where they don't need to stay in Mexico. They would stay in the next safe country. And that's really what the Remain in Mexico was all about. It wasn't just about having people from all these countries stay on the other side of the Mexican border. It was more about staying in the next safe country and applying from there and then waiting your turn in court. So I think if we do those things and add the border security provisions, we would really shut this thing down and have a more controllable process. Remember, 10 years waiting period right now to get a court date in New York City. So adding the judges and asylum officers is a big part of it, but we also have to stem the flow at the border. And if we increase more visas...
It appears that there's some common ground on that actually you might in fact get Democrats and Republicans together. The sticking point appears to be the parole system, as it's called, which allows essentially the president to give humanitarian exceptions to people from countries like we're seeing now, Venezuela, Cuba, and some others here. Tom Till has said on the Senate side, of course, a Republican, asylum reform is not enough to get us to the number that we need. So what happens to the parole system?
Yeah, well, you know what? My mother was a Cuban refugee, and so I relate to those individuals from Cuba and Venezuela who are escaping socialist policies, communist policies. I think that we can certainly look. This is what happened, though. The president issued this parole, but then he didn't enforce the border laws. So the idea of the parole was so the people from Venezuela can apply via parole instead of coming to the border. And that was supposed to shut down Venezuelans coming from the border, but that did not happen because he managed to keep the system, the borders open, so there's a limit to the number of parole, but then you were not enforcing the people who did not apply by parole, but then came to the border regardless, and that was the whole point of parole, was so they didn't come to the border. So you have to have enforcement, right? Any way you look at it, we need to have enforcement at the southern border. It's not just because the flow of migrants is unsustainable, it is because it is completely unsafe. We have drug cartels who are pushing drugs over the border. They are setting up shop in New York City. I just had a meeting today with the Drug Enforcement Administration. Very concerning. They intercepted 200,000 pounds of fentanyl or derivatives, and that is certainly something that we have to take seriously, as we see well over 100,000 Americans dying from these drug overdoses. So there's a lot here that is a problem because of our open border. And what I would say is Republicans want to see border security. We will not give this administration more money to continue processing paperwork. We want our CBP to actually do their job, and that means keeping the border secure so we know who is coming in and out. 1.7 million individuals, aside from the 6 million that had come in and applied for asylum, have come in undetected. That is what CBP estimates. We don't know who they are, where they are, what their intentions are, and that is very concerning to me as a New York City representative in a post 9/11 world.